I was born with a curiosity to explore the realms of darkness, to seek out the elusive shadows and question their existence, their never-ending convolution with the light. All things were born from this darkness. Question everything. Find your own truth, engage all mysteries, open your mind, and join me on my journey through the darkness. Crook Tunnel, Benson, Arizona. June 1912, the body of Henry A. Marks was found battered and mangled beyond recognition. Marks was last seen alive near the Crook Tunnel train station around 6:30 p.m. Witnesses claimed that he was heavily intoxicated when they departed from Bisbee, Arizona. Later that night, when the train arrived to be cleaned, workers made a horrific discovery. The cattle plow on the front of the engine was covered in blood. The railway crew would have to retrace the track back so they could find what the train had hit. They discovered Henry Marks's mangled body in Crook Tunnel. It was believed that an inebriated Marks found himself too tired or drunk to continue, so he decided to lay on or near the tracks. The train hit and killed Marks around 9:30 p.m. Both arms and legs were broken, and one of the arms was nearly severed. The 60-mile track was built in 1902, connecting Benson to Bisbee, Arizona. In the 1960s, due to economic reasons, sections of the track were dismantled or abandoned. To this day, people claim to hear unexplained voices, screams, and moans coming from the tunnel and apparitions of a mangled man warning them to stay away. The Phoenix Lights, Phoenix, Arizona. On March 13, 1997, thousands of residents of Phoenix, Arizona witnessed the most unprecedented mass UFO sighting in history. Sightings began shortly after 8 p.m. over Henderson, Nevada, when a witness claimed to see the V-shaped object flying southeast towards Arizona. By 8:20 p.m., only 20 minutes after the first sighting, people were reporting an unidentified flying object over Phoenix. The distance between Henderson, Nevada, and Phoenix, Arizona is around 285 miles. That means it would take roughly 4.5 hours to drive, or 1 hour to fly by plane. But whatever this was, traveled 285 miles in only 20 minutes. Furthermore, eyewitnesses were reporting identical sightings from all over Phoenix and the surrounding areas. 8:20 p.m. A former police officer observes the object as being very large, V-shaped, and having multiple red-hued lights. 8:23 p.m. The Lay family were living 2,000 feet up in the mountains, where they had the most spectacular and detailed encounter with the object. They described the object as V-shaped and very large, each arm extending a few blocks in length. The object was dark, solid, and quiet. It passed around 100 to 150 feet overhead and made no noise. 8:30 p.m. The object hovered over the southern edge of the city, the lights growing dimmer and fading out one by one. Not only was this observed by many, it was also filmed. The film documenting the infamous Phoenix Lights is now the most respected and researched evidence in existence to proof of UFOs and the truth of extraterrestrials. La Llorona, Tucson, Arizona. The Phantom Banshee, the Crier, La Llorona. She goes by many names, and legends have been told of her haunting Arizona. Early Latin storytellers have told stories of La Llorona since 1550. Although varying, the stories share the same outcome. A woman murders 2 children and is damned to wander the earth, cursed by her heinous execution. The version of La Llorona, now told by Tucson, Arizona natives, describes a woman of promiscuous nature, unattainable desire, and selfishness. La Llorona hated children. They were to blame for her loss in sexual interest. She saw children as a hindrance to living freely. Her promiscuous nature meant that she would likely bear children, and in those times she would lose money because of her pregnancy. Her hatred for the thing living inside her grew. After giving birth, it was said that La Llorona would drown the infants in the river. Upon her death, she was denied entrance into heaven by St. Peter, whom told her she would not be able to enter until she collected all the dead children she murdered. Only then would she be accepted into heaven. Till this day, she is seen wandering the riverbanks in search of her dead children. Natives further warn not to leave your babies alone in the dark, because La Llorona will take them in hopes of tricking St. Peter into acceptance into heaven. The London Bridge, Lake Havasu, Arizona. Spanning a distance of 930 feet and weighing 30,000 tons, the London Bridge is the most famous bridge in the world. Many of us knew of the bridge before we were able to tie our shoes, thanks to the famous 17th century nursery rhyme. As children, most of us sang the tune over and over, never questioning the true meaning of the song. For thousands of years, the London Bridge crossed the Thames River and experienced multiple hardships and ruin. One of the earliest documents of misfortune occurred around 1014, when the Viking king of Norway, Olaf II, anchored his ships to the bridge and pulled it down into the river. The bridge was then rebuilt. Between 1305 and 1660, the bridge would be the grisly sight of the impaled heads of traitors to the king. William Wallace and Guy Fawkes were among those beheaded, dipped in tar, and placed on pikes for all to see. A fire broke out in 1633, bringing the bridge crumbling down once again. It was again rebuilt, but it was soon discovered that the bridge impeded water flow and traffic due to its narrow archways. While the bridge maintained, construction and reconstruction of the bridge occurred until 1831, when the bridge was disassembled and rebuilt once again. The new London Bridge was an architectural marvel, weighing 130,000 tons. Surely this bridge wouldn't fall. In medieval times, there were stories that referred to the watchmen protecting and guarding the safety of the bridges. Children were buried alive in the concrete foundations to serve as a human sacrifice. The souls of these children became the watchmen of the London Bridge, according to legend. But upon completion, the bridge had already begun sinking into the Thames River. The engineers didn't take into account the tons of pressure of the already soft riverbed. The interior of the bridge was hollow and had excess tunnels running throughout. Many believe that Jack the Ripper used these tunnels to evade capture during his reign of terror between 1888 and 1891. By 1967, the bridge was sinking at an alarming rate, and the Common Council of London decided to sell the London Bridge. It was purchased for $2.4 million on April 18, 1968, disassembled, numbered, and shipped off to its current location in Lake Havasu, Arizona. Engineers recreated the bridge and reduced the weight to 30,000 tons. Construction of the bridge was completed October 10, 1971. Since its completion, tourists from all over the United States come to Lake Havasu for a chance to walk across the infamous London Bridge. Many report hearing strange cries that emanate from the concrete structure, while others have seen apparitions of 18th century ghosts walking the bridge at night, out of time and out of place, forever trapped in the Arizona desert. The Superstition Mountains, Apache Junction, Arizona. Just east of Phoenix and looming more than 6,000 feet above the city stands the monolith known as the Superstition Mountains. Formed from volcanic upheaval more than 20 million years ago, the mountains and the surrounding region have been known as a place of reverence and spirituality. Native Apache tribes called the range Thunder Mountain and was said to be the abode of the thunder god. The massive range is known for its strange and unpredictable weather patterns. All cultures tell their own versions of the story of creation. Both the Pima Indians and the Apache surround the origins of all life to the mysterious Superstition Mountains. They tell of tales of floods and giants seeking refuge from the rising waters. The giants, unable to escape the floods, were stricken by lightning and transformed into the stone pillars surrounding the mountains. Early Phoenician legends say the land is cursed, and to this day, natives warn of the dangers the mountains hold. The Hoover Dam was built in 1931 using stone from the Superstition Mountains. Some say that the 213 deaths that occurred during the construction of the dam was caused by the curse. The first overflow of water that came from the dam was collected and used to christen the USS Arizona, a U.S. Navy battleship. The USS Arizona would later be the most disastrous loss during the Japanese attack of Pearl Harbor. 1,177 U.S. Navy passengers died during the attack while aboard the USS Arizona. To this day, the Arizona lies at the bottom of the harbor. Was it the curse or coincidence? Geographically, the Superstitions are some of the most difficult to navigate in the lower 48 states. To date, more than 600 people have lost their lives under mysterious circumstances within the beautiful but deadly mountains while in search of the lost Dutchman's gold. On average, 5 people disappear or perish annually while hiking the deadly terrain. Residents who live within sight of the mountains claim to see shadow people and hear the voices and cries of the people who died there. There are claims of strange lights in the sky, reptilian humanoids and portals, UFOs, and other paranormal phenomenon. Many of the residents speak of curses and doom connected with the mountains. Local historians date the first claims of curses and gold to the mid-1800s when the Peralta family discovered gold during an expedition into the Superstitions. The Peraltas, along with hundreds of other Mexican laborers, were viciously attacked by Apache warriors. All 398 were killed except for one sole survivor, Don Miguel Peralta, who was released with a warning to tell others of the dangers of trespassing onto Apache territory. The site of the tragedy is now known as the Massacre Field. The screams of the victims can still be heard echoing throughout the Badlands. Peralta escaped back to Mexico where he met 2 German prospectors, Jacob Weiser and Jacob Waltz, who would later become known as the Dutchman. He told them about the treasure he and his expedition had discovered and of the brutal massacre that had taken place. Thrilled at the idea of finding riches, the 2 prospectors set out to Arizona, heedless of the dangers Peralta had warned them of. Weiser and Waltz began their search for gold, aware of the Apache watching them from a distance, but they didn't feel threatened by the natives. In 1870, Jacob Waltz headed back into town for additional supplies, leaving his partner behind. When he returned, he found Weiser had been killed by the Apaches. It was around this time that Waltz had indeed found gold in the mountains. Some claimed that it was Waltz who killed Weiser, not wanting to share the gold they had found. Word of gold discovery traveled the mesa like wildfire. Waltz was said to have found the richest gold ever seen and used the ore to buy supplies in town. In 1880, after hearing about Waltz and the discovery of gold within the mountains, 2 soldiers led their own expedition into the Superstitions. They were later found dead, both suffering a bullet wound to the head. A year later, part-time bartender Joe Deering heard the story about the 2 dead soldiers and their search for missing gold and set out on an expedition of his own. He had found an old mine but described it as a ghostly place, the most god-awful, rough place you can imagine. He needed to save money for excavation and needed more experience with mining, so he went to work at the Silver King mine where he was killed in a cave-in a week after starting. He died without ever telling anyone where the mine was located. In 1884, Pedro Ortega was shot and killed within 30 feet of Jacob Waltz's home. Waltz told the sheriff that Ortega's partner had borrowed Waltz's gun and shot him, but many believe it was Jacob Waltz who shot and killed Ortega. In October 1891, the legend of the Lost Dutchman's mine was born after the death of Jacob Waltz. On his deathbed, Waltz gave an encrypted clue to the whereabouts of his gold mine to the woman caring for him. Quote, "The late afternoon sun shines into the mouth of my mine. I can see the military trail from my cave, but you cannot see my cave from the trail. I have only to climb a little distance and I can see Weaver's Needle." Unquote. Beneath his bed, located within a candlebox, the woman found remnants of gold ore. Since his death, many others have perished in pursuit of the lost Dutchman's gold. In 1896, Elisha Rivas, known to locals as the Madman of the Mountains, was found beheaded in the Superstitions. Later that year, 2 nameless men went in search of the mine. They were never seen again. The skeletal remains of a woman was found in a cave in 1910. 2 gold nuggets were found beside the body, but no clothing was found on or near the remains. An amateur treasure seeker by the name of Adolf Ruth had found himself in the possession of a treasure map of what was believed to be the location of the lost Dutchman's mine. In the summer of 1931, Ruth ventured into the Superstitions alone to find the gold. A search party was sent out in search of Ruth after he failed to return. His skull was found after several months of searching, sitting in a deep ravine, bleached by an unforgiving sun. A month later, the rest of his body was found 3/4 of a mile away from where his skull was found. Both legs had been broken, and a bottle was found near the body with a note within that stated that he had found the lost Dutchman's gold. The authorities ruled that he had died of natural causes, even though there were 2 bullet holes in his skull, shot from point-blank range. Ruth's mysterious death sparked national curiosity. Some speculated that he had committed suicide, but there was no weapon found at either the side of the skull or the body. The map to the gold mine was missing, and how had the skull been separated from the body and transported 3/4 of a mile away? In 1937, an old prospector by the name of Guy Frink was found shot dead near LaBarge Canyon. Beside his body was a sack of gold ore. In 1945, Barry Storm published a book on the lost Dutchman's mine and his narrow escape of the superstitions. He claimed a sniper had stalked him and that he believed Ruth was a victim of the same sniper. James Cravey was a prospector obsessed with the lost Dutchman's mine. In 1947, a helicopter dropped Cravey in LaBarge Canyon with hopes of finding the lost gold. When he failed to return to base, a search party was sent out in search of him. Although his camp was found, Cravey was not. His headless skeleton was found tied in a blanket the following February. They found his skull 30 feet away. The coroner ruled Cravey had died of natural causes. In 1949, James Kidd set out for the superstitions, never to be seen or heard from again. 1951, Oregon native John Burns was found dead of a gunshot wound. Ballistic experts testified that he had been shot from a far distance, yet the coroner ruled his death as suicide. 1952, Joseph Kelly disappeared in the Superstition Mountains, never to be seen or heard from again. 1953, 2 young men from California, Ross Blay and Charles Harshberger, disappeared in the mountains. They were never found. 1956, New York native Martin Ziwatho was found dead with a bullet hole through his right temple. A camp was found abandoned near the northern edge of the mountain in 1958. Within the campsite was a blanket covered in blood, a gun cleaning kit but no gun, cooking supplies, and a Geiger counter. There were also handwritten letters found around the camp, but the names and addresses were torn away, leaving no trace to any author or recipients. To this day, the occupants of the campsite remain a mystery. In 1960, a group of hikers found the headless skeleton of Franz Harrer near a cliff. 5 days later, the skeletal remains of William Harvey Jr. were found. 1961, Hilmer Bowen's remains were found. He had been shot through the head. 2 months later, the body of Walter Mowry was also found. His body was riddled with bullet holes, yet his death was ruled suicide. Later in 1961, a prospector by the name of Jay Clapp went missing. His headless skeleton was found 3 years later, but his skull has never been found. 10 more bodies would turn up dead between 1964 and 1980 from mysterious circumstances. The body of Walt Gosler, a long-time treasure hunter who was obsessed with the lost Dutchman's gold, was found dead in 1984 in the Superstition Mountains. Within his pack was gold ore identical to the ore found in the candle box beneath Jacob Waltz's deathbed. These are just a few of the deaths recorded throughout history. To this day, despite countless warnings, treasure seekers still venture out into the Superstition Mountains in hopes of finding the lost Dutchman's mine.